It's pretty much the same way. In the Kemetic tradition, we'll have a bowl of water, which has what we call hesmen in the text, or what people know as natron, which is a solution of pretty much baking soda, and it purifies the water. So we take the water, and it doesn't necessarily have to be what you call the obelisk, which we call the tekken. It could be a tutu, a divine image that represents what it is that you're trying to connect with. And we take the water and we flick it on the image, or even on the ground, to actually ground the presence of that force in the environment. And we say Nahes, Nahes, Nahes. Nahes Imhotep means awake, 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 awake in peace. Pretty much come and receive your water.
Okay, that's the same word that I say rise, right?
Yes,
awake,
yes.
awake, awake.
Yes.
Right. Now, for those of us Africans moving in circles seeking explanatory power to our presence on earth, the fact that most of our history, if not all of it, have been whitewashed, how do we get our people to use the correct names or African names for our gods and goddesses?
Well, in the temple, or in our tradition, I teach a concept called being unapologetically Kemetic, or unapologetically African. I just believe in 2012, at this period of time, it should nearly be impossible not to know the true names of the gods and goddesses.
Right.
So what we do in our tradition, if you come to the temple, we don't acknowledge the wrong names anymore. We just call them by their appropriate name. So when people say, well, who is that? Or what is that? Now that's an invitation to instruct and teach, because we both know that it's very difficult to instruct and teach when there's no curiosity or initial interest.
Right. Now, as you're well aware, in fact, you have articulated this very eloquently in your writing. I am referring to the obliteration and the whitewashing of our history, including names of our lands, people, gods, goddesses. How high is this hurdle in changing the minds?
I don't believe it's too high at all, because it goes back to being unapologetically Kemetic or unapologetically African. Many of us, we still live our lives like we're slaves, hiding our African identity. You will not be beaten, you will not be hung by identifying with your African spirituality. It is 2012, it's time to come up out of the living rooms, out of the basements and out of the back rooms, and come up in the public eye, so our traditions could be scrutinized also by letting the people know that we have a viable spiritual path that's designed to meet our spiritual needs also. Because we often hear that, or we often teach that 80% of Islam, Christianity, and Judaism comes from our tradition, so we should not be ashamed to show those connections. Right. And I know some of our people are like, well, the people won't understand. Will they not understand, or are we just not up for the charge on how to properly articulate when and how to contrast the esoteric and the exoteric parts of our tradition?
Now, back in Africa, we still give names like Asa. In fact, my childhood, when you'll be reading my book shortly, Asa means rain. A person named after rain.
Asa.
And the is a determinant for a human being. We name children called Ampo. And you can hear it similarity like an Ampo.
Yeah, Ampo.
Asasi, Awebroho. We Ani and Anu. We have in where Dr. Kalfana is going. They name their women Anu. Now, Europeans, including Sir E.A. Wallace-Berg, would deny Africans the high culture they established in Kemet, now Egypt. You have already started to help change the whitewashing issue, but we still use names Europeans gave us. Most people of African ancestry and Africans on the mainland still use names like Pygmies for the Twa people of the Congo, and Bushmen for the Abattoir people of the Kalahari. How do we get our political leaders, even including the African Union, the government of South Africa, know that they are people, the Abattoir people are not Bushmen, but they still allow people to label them that? How do we get them to understand this and help us as the religious leaders?
Well, it goes back to being unapologetically Kemetic or unapologetically African. Now, when we consider what the purpose of leadership is about, it's supposed to be addressing the needs of the people. So when we embrace the concept of being unapologetically African or unapologetically whatever denomination of the African tradition you are, then you also have to let them know that there's significant portions of the population that have sacred feelings about these concepts and ideas, and at that point that's the check, and then it would be in their best political interest not to offend the very people that they're trying to address, needs that they're trying to address.
Right. Now, heaven and hell is the main basis for being righteous as Christians believe. My tradition believes that heaven and hell is right here on earth. How close to reality is that, or is the latter?
So if we approach that from a metaphysical perspective, when you say earth, we tend to think of matter, and matter is condensed energy. When we think of energy, we understand it to be light in spirituality. So matter is condensed light, light at a low form of, or its lowest stage, or a very low stage of vibration. So the lower a thing vibrates, the more physical it is. The higher a thing vibrates, the more invisible a thing is. So contrary to popular belief, the unseen is actually real, and what we perceive to be physical is actually half true at most. So if we go by the concept that heaven and hell exist on earth, it is only because it already exists in the unseen, or the other world, or the afterworld, or in this case, the before world.
Okay. Now, what would you say made Kemet the target of many powers, including Persia, Greece, and Rome? Was it the wealth, her advancement, or her religious accomplishments?
Well, the wealth, as you say, and the advancement are results of their religious accomplishment. When people came in Kemet, even the conquerors, when they came in Kemet, the culture stayed. So when the Greeks came to Kemet, they didn't turn Kemet into Greece. When the Romans came, they didn't turn it into Rome. When the Persians came, Kemet stayed more or less. Now, when you consider the Greeks came as students, and some of the most notable Greek philosophers studied from 10 to 22 years. And in the Kemetic tradition, it is believed by some of us that in order to be a full priest, you had to study for 30 or 42 years. So they did not even qualify to be full priests. They were charged to go back and teach their people. So the original philosophers who studied didn't steal anything. You don't go to a college and get a degree, then when you go out and make something of yourself in the world, the college doesn't claim that you stole the information. You can't be a thief if you were accepted as a student. So now if they went back to teach their people charged them of teaching foreign doctrines. So it wasn't until several generations later that their own people began to appreciate what it was that their own philosophers brought, and then their descendants are guilty of claiming what's not theirs. And so that's how Greeks got the credit of being the fathers of philosophy. But they came as students, and the Kemetic culture always maintained, so they came to be initiated into the secrets on how to achieve power and wealth and maintain it, but they never destroyed the Kemetic culture. Now we're almost running out of time, and I want you to address my audience. Speak to them what your mission is. You know,
the mission of the Temple of Anu. What do you intend to do?
As I stated in the beginning, our motto is from the ancient legacy to the living legacy. So we're taking the principles, not every single practice that they did in ancient times. We're taking the principles and we're transmuting them in a way that's relevant for our experience as Africans in America, while staying true to and honoring the original.
Okay. If they want to contact the Temple of Anu, you know, how do they do it?
And they could contact Temple of Anu at facebook.com or www.templeofanu.org on our email.
Okay. I want to thank you very much for coming, but I have a conclusion prayer. Maybe you should say the conclusion prayer.
May we all go, not just in peace and satisfaction, but may we all be charged to not only live, but act upon that which we know to be true. So in that, in our tradition, we would say, Amen Ma'at, may harmony be established.
Amen Ma'at.
Amen Ma'at, Dua Nete.
Okay. African traditionalism is different. Different is not deficient. Different is not primitive. Different is not uncivilized. Different is not ungodly. Different is just different. Africans have always used different methods to connect to their maker. One clap by an African is a prayer worth millions of words. They don't pray to the devil. To my regular viewers, I thank you for your patronage. For those of you tuning in for the first time, you have just embarked on a journey in African traditionalism. May Amun-Re, whom my tradition calls Nawene, continue to bless you. May he lead us and my guest and his entourage safely home.